Oh my gosh, you guys, I am so excited to be bringing this to you today. Welcome everyone. What's It Movie Pod, your favorite podcast. And today we are going to introduce you to something that you will not see anywhere else. So it's kind of exciting.
So cool.
What they do is they tell you about, they do a review or else a behind the scenes. And I love behind the scenes, I'm sure you guys do, of a movie that is extremely interesting but isn't well known, that has been forgotten, or else it's been buried for various, usually legal reasons, or because of some really unusual situation that no one had control over. And now these movies, which are really amazing, are unfairly forgotten. So it's a rundown of amazing filmmaking stories and reviews that are part of these really, really good forgotten movies. So you can't get it anywhere else. You have to get it there, is the
This
point.
website, thescinematicals.com, covers movies in a way that you have just never really seen before. First off, there are movies that you cannot see anywhere for a variety of reasons, but you get a look at either how the movie came to be made or how it all fell apart, and they are the most interesting movies ever. It's like the first one, which we will cover, is called Chills, and it is literally, well, not literally, but it's all about the making of The Shining, which is the scariest and craziest Hollywood production ever. But in this version, they talk about this movie, Chills, where you have not just a crazy director like Kubrick and not just a scary actor like Jack Nicholson, but you pair him up with a messed up young method actor who seems like Heath Ledger. It is filled with tense, dramatic possibilities, for sure. The way that it is told is almost like a documentary where various people on the production tell you about the growing tension on the set. And you have this astoundingly demanding movie director who is obviously similar to Kubrick and has all of his quirks of doing 200 takes and not telling you what you're doing wrong. And then an actor like a Heath Ledger type of guy who is just terribly sensitive, and he's buried in the role and he can't handle this intense director very well. On top of that, the young actor, whose name is Brady, is getting these psychological games played on him by his co-lead, the older actor Kurt, who is modeled on Jack Nicholson. The subtle mind games and the really scary winter atmosphere, it comes together to make a very interesting read, and it's a quick read. Again, that is on thescinematicals.com is the website there.
So it's a behind the scenes on a movie, very much like The Shining. But here's the thing. It has its own peculiar and interesting story, but it has every bit the feel of The Shining with its own details and scary moments. It's really more about a family in olden times, as we call it, back in the late 1800s, and then how that family's insanity impacts the people who take over the estate much later. So it has its own thing, but it's just such amazing imagery. And I think anyone who can do this really well, where they imitate or recreate the cold, sterile style of Kubrick, is doing something amazing.
Kubrick was, I mean, maybe he was insane. I don't know. To say he was demanding is just not saying it enough. But the way they use that in this is he seems to be fully aware that he is manipulating his actors. Like, he is really pretty malevolently toying with the fragile psyches of everyone involved to get what he wants on film. And that extends even to, you know, the little kid in the movie who is terrorized constantly. But the two actors, the Jack Nicholson guy and the emotional, drugged out Heath Ledger guy, they are both sympathetic and yet very scary, and getting scarier by the moment because the director is pushing them further and further. It's a very interesting dynamic and a cool way to tell this story overall.
This is really amazing content that you're just not going to get at, the New York Times or something. No one has this kind of background. And it's fascinating. If you're into movies at all, this is something you have to check out. It's called thescinematicals.com, and that's the whole phrase, thescinematicals.com. And Cinematicals is with an S. You have to put the S in Cinematicals, and there you go. You should check it out. Link in the description, but we're going to tell you a little about it right now.
I don't do a Jack Nicholson impression either, by the way, but I wish I could, because if there are like young listeners and they don't know his whole story. He is a pretty fascinating actor in himself, and to make him a character in this incredibly tense, scary, iconic movie, it makes for a disturbing but rewarding new layer to the actor for us to discover. I wonder, this would be such an amazing part for someone to play, because you can't do an impression of Jack Nicholson. That would be awful. That would be a skit. But you can do a great way of evoking him. So I don't know who would play him. It would be a jaw-dropping part to get, though, as an actor.
And I don't know if people know this, if they're aware, but Jack Nicholson kind of famously said he was losing his mind a little bit playing the Joker. It's just such an insane and disturbing role to stay in all the time. And if you want to play it right, you have to get into that headspace. And that's not comfortable, even though it's just dress up, it's just a comic book movie. There's something about that role, the Joker in Batman, that is just scary. It's sort of a cursed role, which is another part of that story, Chills. Is there such a thing as a cursed role? Are there roles you shouldn't play? They're too immoral or they're too. I don't know. But Nicholson told Heath Ledger before he played the Joker, it's a really fucked up gig. That part kind of messes you up. You really don't want to do it. Be careful. Take care of your psyche, you know?
Heath Ledger, too, as an inspiration for a character in a movie about making movies, is very interesting. He's such a tragic person. That's another amazing role to play, an actor who's falling apart because of the demands of the part and because he's a method actor and everyone knows it. But they keep pushing him to get the performance. You know, it's like that alone is a very compelling sort of space to work in. And there are other actors who've been through that, you know, like method actors in the past, tortured by their characters. So you got Brando and James Dean and Montgomery Clift and great weirdos like Dennis Hopper. There are a lot of types that an actor could play with if he was playing Brady from this story. Very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can sort of, even though I'm not an actor, I can sort of relate to that, getting too inside of a part. But as a horror story, as a jumping off point for a narrative about terror and psychological terror, I personally can't think of where I've seen that before. It would be an unbelievable movie or series, you know, like for FX or Netflix. Netflix would be great, or HBO. They do an amazing job. Behind the scenes on The Shining, but an even weirder movie than that.
Okay, so then go over to thecinematics.com and check it out. I think people who like movies will be pretty taken by the whole thing going on there. It's the word the as in THE and then cinematicals with an S, thecinematics.com. Also, we can include an intriguing clip from their website where they have a kind of audiobook narration thing, sort of like a BBC radio drama or something. So we can show you a bit of that to whet your appetite a little bit more.
I don't even really like horror
per
se as a genre, but this is more of a drama that has intense horror elements. You know what I mean? It's a really big, meaty set of parts for great actors because the setup of the characters is so strong. But even though it has its share of fearsome, grotesque sort of moments or ideas or what have you, I think anyone would find it really, really engaging. So you can't not.
Let's play the clip now then. This is a short little audio clip of the cinematicals.com to give you a taste of the spooky little narratives on offer there. So here we go.
For me, it's Richard has to take some blame. You know, he just does. It was very high-pressure filmmaking. It was very remote. It was very insular, you know. I couldn't stand it myself. I'm from Scotland and I'm used to open spaces, and we were stuck in that mansion for just too long. Now, do I think Brady Ledger would have been all right if he wasn't shooting this film? I think he would have been shooting people up like at Columbine. He was just deeply disturbed as an individual. But Richard didn't help him. Richard used that. He was using him to get the performance.
I didn't like Kurt, I never did. And I didn't get along with Richard, and he did something terrible. He made the actors feel like they were a big joke, like frauds. There was so much tension, and it was weird in that Hollywood way, you know, where it would seem friendly, congenial, but then under the surface, it really wasn't. The little jokes would get mean. Richard told Kurt he wasn't an actor. He couldn't act. He said that, and it was a joke at first, then it wasn't. Once we started getting tired, take after take, and the location began to get inside us a little bit, then Richard would mutter that, "You're an actor."
So there was this time before that weekend when Kurt went on the
Living room set, and he started smashing everything and yelling, "I'm not an actor, I'm not an actor." And he was so furious, like homicidal. He got right up into my face because I was standing next to Richard, and he yelled, "I'm not an actor." Now, I know he was really yelling at Richard, but in reality, it was my face that was getting shouted at. And then Kurt just lost it. He started talking to the camera assistant, Paul Helberg, like just crazy, taunting. "Did you hear that, Paul? I'm not an actor. Paulie, do you think I'm an actor? Because he says I'm not an actor." And all that, which is on film. Richard was shooting everything by then. Kurt starts kind of manhandling Paul, who's a young guy, really nice guy. And Kurt is shaking him, sort of like not real, just getting into his role at first. But then not. It's really not. And he punches Paul in the face with every word. "I'm not an actor." That's what you're seeing on that footage. I know it's gone around the world by now. I'm not an actor. But what I realized later was it was becoming a mantra. He was starting to try not to be an actor at all, but to become a man who murders a family. Brady saw all this, just always watching, and it just built from there.
Kurt had started covering himself in smeared white face paint and red dabs, so he looked like a jester in this full costume. Because in the final scene, the father, who has become like the Victorian killers, he dresses like they did when the murders happened. He's a jester killing people in this living room. And the brothers, two jesters beside him, watch it happen almost, you could say, gleefully. So then Brady started doing it, dressing that way. And there was one time I went to their trailers and they were both together in there alone and they were being so quiet. And they were both dressed that way, like jesters, staring at each other. It was really getting insane, I thought, at that point, because they didn't have a call that day for being in costume. So I just thought, what the bloody hell is happening on this set? Someone needs to get us out of this.
So that is Chills, which is a behind-the-scenes type story, a documentary-styled thriller story about a movie like The Shining, which you can read at thescinematicals.com. And now we'll take a look at another one of their exclusive stories. This is also an interesting one.
This is an amazing, cool Legend of Hollywood type story is what you got here. If you love movies, then you must know Alfred Hitchcock. Hitchcock, director of Psycho and all those things, master of suspense. Well, there's a story that goes that Alfred Hitchcock had this out-of-this-world incredible movie that he made that never saw the light of day. It was the most suspenseful, freaky thriller ever back in like 1966. And it was buried because of all the things that happened making it. And this revenge, this lawyer guy, I guess, wanted to get on Hitchcock. So the film got locked up forever, never to be released. And that would almost be the end of the story.
But it is not the end of the story because the cinematicals.com got hold of the only print ever and did a review, and the whole backstory is up there. And it's a great story. Like, a lot of people would kill to see this long-lost Hitchcock film. Supposedly, only Quentin Tarantino ever got to see it, and he kept it from Martin Scorsese, so they have like a beef about this. Because there was just one print of the movie. There was only one copy. So anyway, the Cinematicals actually gives you the plot pretty much beat by beat. It's a lost Hitchcock movie. I love this. The movie is crazy, scary, and way out there for its time. It's about this guy who gets kidnapped by a rich banker who plans to cut off the guy's limbs slowly and feed it to his pet. White Lion. The guy was supposed to be Jimmy Stewart, and he is in this flamboyantly extravagant Citizen Kane mansion, and he has to slowly get eaten by this frightening, starving white lion. And that's the setup. It's crazy. You wonder how Hitchcock shot this movie because the Cinematicals describes it really well, these great, elaborate thriller set pieces, but we can't see it. It's impossible to see. But you have this starved-to-death white lion that had to be trained to, crawl toward the hero of the thing, and everybody says the animal's flawless. He might be the best actor ever. Best actor of 1966, maybe. And there's a sequence where the main hero is in a hall with gigantic blow-up pictures of crime scene photographs, and that seems like a great visual setup. And then the ending, which is, well, you got to read about it on cinematicals.com.
How did they even do these special effects back then? I mean, I know Hitchcock is a genius, but you have a lion who has to act and then a guy who's paralyzed. And I mean, how did they do this kind of thing?
Exactly. How did they do the effect of a guy who basically he gets whittled away little by little? He loses a leg and then another and then an arm day by day, and he has to try to escape being this torn up character who has lost his limbs. How did they do that back then? I mean, there was no green screen, people. But the suspense really must be crazy. A guy crawling away from a starving, really scary white lion in a darkened mansion, and the whole thing directed by Hitchcock. It really must be an amazing movie.
Keep in mind, they describe the villain of this movie as the scariest villain of the 20th century. Scarier than Hitchcock's own Psycho or even the bad guys in the various other thrillers he did, like Notorious or Torn Curtain or whatever. And he's this guy who, I think he might be a former Nazi, but he's a German guy, Kessner, and he's deformed and mutilated, and he is going after this poor guy, the hero. And we don't even know what does he want revenge for? What did our poor hero do to deserve this? It's really a high-level premise. I mean, what a great story. It's too bad we cannot see the Hitchcock movie itself.
It sucks that we can't see this Hitchcock movie, and if there is still a print of it, someone has to get it to us. I don't care what the lawyers say. It just sounds utterly amazing. But they do a great job on Cinematicals of breaking down the whole thing, and it's an entertaining, quick read, very old-fashioned, but even the thing is, I don't think it is that old-fashioned in a way because it's still to this day a shakes-you-up kind of premise. It's pretty damn scary, really. So go and read up your Cinematicals and see what you think. This movie even had a great Bernard Herrmann music score, so that's pretty amazing. A lot of people would want to hear that. The Psycho score is so iconic, I wonder what else he came up with. Anyway, that's our cinematicals.com review today. Go see something cool, or at least read something cool.
We will see you next time you hear us.
So you can read about Murderous, the Hitchcock film, and the sort of making of The Shining turned into a thriller in itself, Chills, on the website called thescinematicals.com. And that will wrap it up for us this time. Go see something cool.